People say, oh, you can't change human nature overnight. You're asking us to give up the ego, and that's the most difficult of all things to do. Actually, it isn't, because the ego doesn't exist. But of course, if you try to give up your ego with your ego, then it'll take you to the end of time.
All of this is a game, but you forgot that you are playing. The rush, the fears, the frustrations, the constant feeling of being behind, that something is missing, something is wrong with you. None of this is as real as it seems. And the most unsettling part is that, on some deep level of your consciousness, you accepted being here. You chose this experience. You chose to feel fear, pain, loneliness, loss. As absurd as it may seem now, this is exactly what Alan Watts proposes to us. He said that life is like a show, a play where you are not just a spectator, but also an actor. And the problem is that you forgot this. You got so lost in the role that you began to believe you are it. You forgot that suffering is part of the plot, that chaos is part of the scenery. And so you live as if everything were definitive, as if every loss were the end, as if every crisis were a real collapse and not just a scene. But what if I told you that the fear that paralyzes you is not the enemy, that the mistake is not feeling, but resisting? Alan Watts spoke about metaphysical courage, the ability to look pain in the eye and keep moving forward, not because you are insensitive, but because you know that all of this is a game, not a superficial game where everything is a joke, but a deep, sacred game where even suffering has its purpose. How many times have you found yourself trapped in a cycle of worry, as if your mind were peeling an infinite onion, always with another layer of anxiety hidden beneath the previous one? You worry about money, then about health, then about the future, about others, about everything. And deep down, you feel that if you stop worrying, you will be irresponsible, you will be naive. But what Watts reveals is the opposite. Worrying is not a sign of awareness, it is a sign of imprisonment. You are trapped in a game, but you don't know you are playing. You are reacting, fighting, struggling, all because you forgot that above all, you chose to be here. And the key to getting out of this trance is not to fight against it. It is to remember. Remember that it is just a game. Remember that even fear is just a part of the script. And then, when you truly accept this, something changes. The pain still comes, but it does not dominate you. The fear appears, but it does not define you. And for the first time, you begin to play with awareness. This is the proposal of this video. Not to convince you of a new belief, but to invite you to remember what has always been there, behind all the layers. You don't need to win the game. You just need to wake up. And if you feel that this awakening makes sense, then stay with me until the end, because what comes next may change the way you see everything. You live on a stage, and the most intriguing part is that you yourself helped write the script, chose the setting, and threw yourself into the role without remembering that it was all a performance. Alan Watts saw existence as a cosmic theatrical play, a performance where the universe plays at forgetting that it is the universe, just to be able to rediscover itself. You, I, all of us are expressions of this divine play, this game of existential hide-and-seek. But what does this mean in practice? It means that every situation in your life, from the most trivial to the most terrifying, are scenes carefully placed before you. Not to punish you, nor to test you, but so that you can feel. Feel fear, feel pain, feel ecstasy, love, longing, frustration. Feel intensely. It's like going to the movies knowing that the film will make you cry or tremble with fear. You want that, because deep down, you know it's just a movie. And it's exactly this awareness that you have lost. Watts said that life needs contrast. Without darkness, light would not be perceived. Without suffering, joy would seem empty. And that's why we choose to forget. We allow ourselves to dive into the game, Forget the how and the why, and just react, as if everything were definitive, as if the stage were a prison, not a setting. That's why so many people live in panic, seeking control, trying to protect themselves from something that was never a threat. Because they forgot that fear, pain, loss are not accidents. They are parts of the performance. And when you understand this, not as a beautiful theory, but as a truth that resonates deep in your soul, you stop running. You begin to watch the spectacle. And for the first time, instead of fighting against the storm, you feel the rain fall. But this awakening does not come without resistance. Because the ego, this character you wear every day, fights to maintain the illusion. It wants control, wants certainty, wants protection. It fears surrender. It fears accepting that it is not in command. And it is exactly here that Alan Watts's most radical invitation arises, to develop a new form of courage. Not physical courage, not the bravery that faces the external world, but something much deeper, the courage not to resist. This is the so-called metaphysical courage that changes everything. And it is about this that we will talk now. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. There is a type of courage that most people never develop. Not because it is impossible, but because it requires an internal leap that challenges everything you have learned about yourself and the world. Alan Watts called this metaphysical courage. And no, it has nothing to do with being strong in the traditional sense. It is not about facing external battles, but about confronting internal ghosts without looking away. To look at fear, sadness, loneliness, and not run. To stay, to feel, to remain present. True courage is not the absence of fear. It is the conscious decision not to resist fear when it appears. Watts said that when we allow fear to exist without rejecting it, without trying to suppress it, it loses the control it has over us. It is the opposite of what society teaches. From a young age, we learn to suppress, to avoid, to distract. Do you feel anxious? Distract yourself. Are you afraid? Stay busy. But all of this is escape, and every escape strengthens exactly what we are trying to flee from. Metaphysical courage begins when you abandon the idea that you need to fix what you feel. When you stop blaming yourself for being afraid, for feeling weak, or for not being in control. It is when you look at the emotion as a natural phenomenon, like the warmth of a flame, like the chill of dawn. It is not something you do. It is something that happens. And the more you try to resist, the more fear grows. The more you try to control, the more powerless you feel. The Japanese samurai knew this. That is why they studied Zen. They wanted to achieve a state of presence so absolute, so deep, that even death lost its power over them. They sought what Watts called the ultimate nerve, the supreme nerve, the ability to traverse emotional hell without hesitation, to continue even when everything inside you says to retreat. They knew that beneath the raised sword lies hell, but it is precisely there, in the crossing without resistance, that the land of bliss is revealed. And maybe you are thinking, but I am not a samurai. I tremble, I freeze, I run away. That's okay. Watts knew that too. He said, don't try not to be afraid. Just stop being afraid of your own fear. It is at this point that the cycle begins to unravel. Because when you accept fear as part of the spectacle, as part of the dance, it transforms. It becomes energy, movement, life. But if resisting fear traps us, what exactly keeps us in this constant cycle of anxiety and worry? Why, even when we know that fear is an illusion, do we continue to feed it? This is where we enter the infinite onion of worry, the next level of this illusion that keeps us captive. Let's talk about that now. The anxious mind is like an onion with infinite layers. You solve one problem, peel away a layer, and soon another one arises. You take off another, and another appears. And so you go on living, always in emergency mode, with the feeling that peace is always one step ahead, always on the other side of yet another worry. But what Alan Watts reveals is brutally honest. This onion never ends, because the problem is not in the layers. It's in the way you learn to deal with fear. You worry about work, about money, about health, about the future. And even when everything seems fine, something in you remains restless, as if you can't relax. And do you know why? Because you learn to identify with worry. Because at some point in your life, you were conditioned to believe that worrying is a way to be in control, a proof of responsibility, a way to anticipate pain. But that is a lie. Watts said that the habit of worry is an emotional addiction, a way to keep the mind busy so you don't have to face the void. Because in silence, in the absence of problems, an uncomfortable question arises. What if I have nothing else to worry about? Who am I? Most people don't know how to live without the constant tension of solving something. They feel guilty for resting, for stopping, for simply existing. And the most ironic part, this continuous worry solves absolutely nothing. It only distorts perception, amplifies the problem, and traps you in an endless cycle of anxiety. You start to live as if danger is inevitable, even when you are safe. And when one threat disappears, your mind finds another. The onion never stops growing, and the more you look at it, the more it occupies your entire field of vision. The small problem turns into a catastrophe. Doubt becomes panic. Life transforms into an emotional minefield. But there is a way out. Watts invites us to change our relationship with fear and anxiety. He proposes that we exchange worry for contemplation, that instead of resisting, we start to observe, that instead of fighting against uncertainty, we begin to marvel at it. Because only when you let go of the need for control does the true meaning of existence begin to reveal itself. And that is the key point of transformation, shifting the focus from resistance to admiration, completely redefining the way you perceive the world. But how exactly do you do that? How do you move from chronic worry to a state of true presence in the face of life? That is what we will talk about now. The greatest illusion that keeps us prisoners of anxiety is the idea that worrying is a demonstration of responsibility. How many times have you found yourself thinking that if you stop worrying, something terrible will happen? As if constant tension were an invisible amulet against tragedy. Alan Watts debunks this deeply rooted belief and proposes something so simple and so revolutionary that few have the courage to accept. Life does not need to be controlled, it needs to be contemplated. Watts suggests that instead of fighting against our emotions, we should open ourselves to them with the same reverence we admire a storm. When you see lightning crossing the sky, you don't try to stop it. You observe, you marvel. You feel the force of that raw energy and surrender to the beauty of what cannot be controlled. In the same way, he invites us to look at our emotions, fear, sadness, anger, with eyes of admiration, not resistance. It is a brutal reprogramming of the mind. Because your whole life you have been trained to resist, to arm yourself emotionally against the unpredictable, to wage internal battles that you can never win. But existence, as Watts teaches, is not something that needs to be conquered. It is something that needs to be lived, with all its ups and downs, all its contradictions, all its imperfections. When you start to see worry for what it really is, a distortion of attention, an attachment to the illusion of control, something changes. The mind begins to open to the wonder of simply being alive, to the mystery of feeling, breathing, existing. Suddenly, what seemed like a threat transforms into an invitation. Fear is no longer an enemy to be defeated, but a natural phenomenon to be witnessed. Sadness is no longer a mistake, but a color in the palette of human experience. But this transformation does not happen intellectually. It is not an idea that you understand, and that's it. It needs to be embodied. You need to feel it in your body, in your heart. You need to practice surrendering to what you cannot control. You need to allow life to happen without trying to reshape it according to your fears. And this practice starts at the most basic level, in the way you feel your emotions. Because, as Watts also reminds us, emotions like fear are no different from the heat we feel when we approach a flame. They are natural, spontaneous responses. They are not the problem. The problem is the attempt to suppress them, to control them, to mold them according to an idealized image of who you should be. So the next inevitable question is, how to feel fear and all emotions freely, without resistance, without becoming a prisoner of them. That is exactly what we are going to unravel now. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebook, Beyond the Shadow. It breaks down Jung's core ideas and gives you tools to understand yourself more deeply. Link is in the pinned comment. Fear is like the heat of a flame. It is not something you choose to feel, just as you do not choose to warm up when you approach a campfire. It is automatic, instinctive, natural. But unlike heat, which we accept as a bodily reaction, we resist fear. We try to suffocate, hide, ignore it. We teach ourselves to believe that feeling fear is a sign of weakness, that it is a character flaw, that we should be able to control our emotions, as if they were pieces on a board. Alan Watts dismantles this illusion with brutal precision. It is not fear that destroys us. It is the resistance to fear. It is the refusal to allow the emotion to happen that drags us into chronic anxiety, guilt, despair. When you feel fear and try to suppress it, it does not disappear. It transforms into something larger, denser, more paralyzing. Repressed fear becomes chronic worry, becomes panic, becomes silent despair. The wisdom lies in recognizing that fear is not your enemy. It is merely a natural response to the vastness of life. Uncertainty generates fear. The unknown generates fear. And that's okay. There is nothing wrong with that. The mistake is believing that you need to eliminate it to be free. True freedom arises the moment you allow fear to exist within you, just as heat exists in the body, without trying to extinguish it, without trying to modify it, without identifying with it. Imagine yourself in front of a campfire. You feel the heat on your face. You do not fight the heat. You do not panic because the fire is hot. You simply feel, adjust your distance if necessary, and move on. It should be the same with fear. It arises. You feel. You observe. You do not need to react. You do not need to interpret. You do not need to build stories about what this means about you. This deep acceptance transforms fear from something oppressive into something that simply is. It does not need to be heroic. It does not need to prove anything to anyone. Just be there, aware, feeling, embracing the human experience in its entirety. And here is the most crucial point. Every time you suppress an emotion, you fragment yourself. You create internal zones of tension that undermine your vital energy. But when you allow the emotion to flow, when you feel it without fear of it, you reintegrate. You become more whole. You reclaim parts of yourself that were hidden behind the armor of resistance. Watts shows us that this is true alchemy, transforming fear into presence, transforming pain into inner strength, transforming vulnerability into awakened consciousness. And from this consciousness, a new way of existing is born. An existence where freedom is not the absence of difficult emotions, but the freedom to experience them without becoming a prisoner of them. But after all, if all life is a spectacle, if every emotion is a fleeting scene, What role are you playing now? And do you still need to identify with it? This is what we will explore next. Life will not stop challenging you. No matter how much you meditate, how much you study, how much you try to strengthen yourself. The show goes on. The scenes of loss, fear, anguish, and joy will continue to unfold, one after the other, like a river that never ceases its flow. The difference lies in how you will cross this river, how you will inhabit each scene, each emotion, each moment. Alan Watts reminds us that the goal is not to escape the play. It is not to abandon the theater. It is not to hide from difficult feelings or pretend you are not afraid. True awakening happens when you remember, deeply, viscerally, that you are playing a game, and that even tears, even the silent screams of pain, are part of the dance. You do not need to win at life. There is no trophy waiting at the end. There is no judge evaluating you backstage. You are here to live, to experience, to lose yourself and find yourself 1,000 times within yourself. To feel the heat and the cold, the laughter and the mourning, birth and death, knowing that all of this is temporary, all of this is part of the divine play. When you stop resisting, stop wanting things to be different from what they are, something extraordinary happens. You set yourself free, not because the circumstances have changed, but because your relationship with them has changed. You cease to be a puppet pulled by the invisible strings of fear and anxiety and begin to dance consciously on the stage of existence. Metaphysical courage, then, is this ability to keep walking even under the raised sword, to traverse the internal hells without allowing yourself to be paralyzed, to look at the vastness of life in all its chaotic beauty and say, I accept, I am here, I feel everything. And that is why this message is so important. Because in today's world, where we are taught to flee from pain at all costs, remembering that it is possible to cross through fear and not just survive it, but grow through it, is an act of true spiritual rebellion. Now, I want to hear from you. Which part of this reflection touched you the most? At what moment in your life did you forget you were playing a game? Leave your comment below. Your experience may inspire others who, like you, are seeking to awaken from this collective trance. And remember, the journey does not end here. If this message resonated with you, it is essential that you continue. The next video brings reflections that complement this internal transformation we started today. Do not skip this step. It is important, because awakening is just the first step, and the best is yet to come.